And many other, we are building Plan B Network, which is trying to centralize education into one big database that can be easily distributed, translated, and shared around the world.
My name is Damien, and I'm professor of philosophy in Paris.
The two high schools where you teach philosophy are amongst the 3 or 4 best high schools in the country, aren't they?
True, yes. I have very smart students, but I see how big is the state's control in education.
And actually, I can just show you the platform so we can explore it together if you want.
Fantastic.
All right, so Plan B Network is really just a massive library of educational content. It ranges from a lot of tutorials. We right now have around 12 to 14 languages. In addition to all those tutorials, we have a big database of resources ranging from various podcasts, conference replay. The core is the courses. Right now, we have more than 20 courses available on the platform.
In my course, I track the origins of freedom in antiquity with the Greeks and Romans, through the Middle Ages with the birth of universities and the first form of capitalism in Italian cities. From the Renaissance to the Enlightenment, I describe the rise of freedom, religious tolerance, and the fight for free trade. I investigate the apogee and the decline of liberty in modern time, the Marxist critique of capitalism, and the Austrian critique of Marxism. Finally, the rise of the welfare state in the 20th century, and the great fight between Keynes and Hayek.
And what is really fascinating with this course is that it really drives you through history. So if we look basically
there's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds are getting so much resistance from behind. Time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
I was raised a little young nigga doing bad shit. Talk much shit cause I never had shit. I could remember being whooped in class, and if I didn't pass, mama whooped my ass. Was it my fault? Mama didn't plan it out. Broke out, left me to be the man of the house. I couldn't take it, had to make a profit. Found a block, got a Glock, and I clocked bricks. Making G's was my mission. Moving up for this shit to get my mama out the kitchen. And why must I sock the fella just to live laws like...
Hi everyone, hello Roxy, Damien. Welcome to the Bitcoin Roundtable. How are you doing, Damien?
Yes, fine. Thank you.
Fine. And Roxy, it's great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having it.
I think it's the first time. It's the second episode, and it's the very first time you're joining the roundtable. So I'm really happy about it. And for those who might not know you yet, can you present yourself, introduce yourself briefly, perhaps say who you were before you joined the Bitcoin adventure, and what kind of person you've become now that you've fallen in the rabbit hole?
Sure. So hi everyone, my name is Roxy. I'm the co-founder of Plan B Network and founder of Découvre Bitcoin. Just regular French person. I traveled most of my life to Canada, South Africa when I was younger, and I was always curious about how the world was working, what was the inner system of the financial system, and the inequality could bring. And one day I just discovered Bitcoin. It hit me pretty hard, and I didn't stop learning or working on it for the past probably almost 9 years now. And I started with just regular financing companies around Bitcoin, and then education for the past 5 years or 6 years. And now with Giacomo, you, Jacques, Damien, and many other, we are building Plan B Network, which is trying to centralize education into one big database that can be easily distributed, translated, and shared around the world to try to help everyone understand what is monetary salvation, let's say.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly a very special initiative. This Plan B network. I mean, it's really a constellation. There's a lot of individual and groups who contribute to this initiative, and our special guest today, Damien Tellier, is one of them. Damien, can you say a few words about yourself?
Yes, my name is Damien, and I'm professor of philosophy in Paris since 25 years. And I teach in a Jesuit private high school. I have very smart students, but I see how big is the state's control in education. And it's a big shame for me because when you see the textbooks in class, it's only simplistic schemes like Keynes, Marx, neo-Marxism, and nothing about the great thinkers of liberty as like Bastia, Robert Turgot, Jean-Baptiste Say. So I'm here as a teacher to help with Plan B network, and I'm very happy to do that.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the two schools, the two high schools where you teach philosophy are amongst the 3 or 4 best high schools in the country, aren't they?
True. Yes.
And so, despite the fact that they're pretty conservative institution, they've totally buried the wisdom of those French free thinkers and liberals, economists, right?
Yes, and it's why I decided to found an alternative way of teaching online, privately, and I founded the Institut Copé and École de la Liberté to spread the ideas of the French liberal, classical liberal school.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful. We can talk about that because it's full of resources that Bitcoiners will enjoy. We've got French and English speaking books, I think. Anyway, I think today you are aware that we are meeting in the context of this second episode of the BTC Roundtable. We are dealing with the connection between money, violence, and war, and it's a burning issue. I mean, because beyond the kinetic war, which we see escalate each and every week, there's also a lot of economic violence, and we can read the connection between the two. So we thought, okay, we need to do an episode on that. We started with a thematic conversation, bringing together Giacomo Zucco and Ulrich Fromme. They studied a particular chapter of the book Money, Sound and Unsound from Joseph Salerno, a very interesting read. Plus, they did some sort of genealogy of the concept of private property. And that's something fairly unusual and quite fun. So you can have a look at that. Then, as usual, we've got a small segment, a 10-minute video of hands-on monetary education where David is showing his collection of coins and monetary artifacts to illustrate this very close connection between money and war and violence in the history of mankind. We'll have a talk in a few days with Agelex and Gloire to discuss how Bitcoin can make a difference for people living in extremely violent geographies. Gloire is in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But today, really, the idea is to try to discuss with Roxy all the learning resources that can be accessed for free in I don't know how many languages on the Plan B network website, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I think what Damien did in the past with École de la Liberté is exactly what we are trying to do on a more international and Bitcoin scale with education, bringing maybe controversial for the institution education to the masses where they will not have it at school. Anymore, because they literally just removed the last chapter of Austrian economics from the high school textbook, I think 2 years ago. So we really see that shift. And so the idea is really to not only with Plan B Network teach about Bitcoin and Lightning, but also economics, finance, and part of the economy is actually philosophy, like Damien mentioned in one of his courses, because maybe Damien can explore on it, but where does economy as a course school topic comes from, it's actually the free thinking of philosophy, right, Damien?
Yes, yes. And I created two courses, one on Bastia, his life, influences, and thought. And the second is on the history of liberty, the very roots of liberty. And I plan to build a third course on the core principles of a free society, political philosophy.
I think it's amazing that you are producing so many courses. And actually, I can just show you the platform so we can explore it together if you want.
Fantastic.
All right, so Plan B Network is really just a massive library of educational content, right? And it ranges from a lot of tutorials on nodes, wallet, mining. We have more than 100 tutorial nowadays. So if you are really interested in, for example, how does privacy work? Because in Bitcoin, we do have a lack of privacy. So we really need to learn how to better prepare ourselves to not be traced by the government or institution. We have in-depth tutorial on all of those matters. And like you mentioned, basically we right now have around 12 to 14 languages, ranging from really Spanish, Dutch, but also Chinese, Russian, Japanese, etc. And all the information are translated. If we go back just to English, in addition to all those tutorials, we have a big database of resources ranging from various podcasts, conference replay, even conference replay from the past that you can explore with various topics, whether it's economic, lightning, technical, etc. We have a large database of podcasts that you can even find in your own languages. So if you switch to your local language, the idea is that that resources is easily accessible to you. And while a lot of those resources are quite important, interesting, the core is the courses. Right now, we have more than 20 courses available on the platform, ranging from a large variety of topic, which is basically Bitcoin, business, mining, protocol, security, and social study. And what's interesting more here for today's episode is going to be the social study aspect, because like we mentioned, Damien wrote two of those courses, The Life and Influence of Bastia and The Philosophy of History of Freedom. David, that you mentioned, also wrote a courses on hyperinflation. We have one on Australian economics. And the idea is always to expand that tree of knowledge and go deeper into every path of it. So we want a really generic approach. What is economics? What is the different thought person? And I think, for example, in Bastia, we start to learn a lot about its influence and the opponent. And the idea would be to really go and explore all of those one. And for example, Damien, you mentioned that some people are completely forgotten from history, right? Like Jean-Baptiste Say, for example, that is not as famous as maybe he could be credited.
Yes, Jean-Baptiste Say is better than Adam Smith, but it's not well known actually.
And Bastia is really one of your preferred thinker, isn't he?
Yes, because Bastia is the greatest communicator of basic economics. He has always a good story, a good analogy to explain basic concepts, like the candle maker's petition or the broken windows fallacy. And his most famous quote is about the state. The state is the great fiction by which everyone tries to live at the expense of everyone else.
Yeah. You know, the thing is, I think I discovered Bastia. The first time I've ever heard about him was in the powerful voice of Max Kaiser. He was always referring to Bastia, and so it's fantastic that it's through Bitcoin that we French people get to discover the wisdom of those countrymen.
Yes, and the founders of the Austrian School of Economics, Karl Menger and Ludwig von Mises, were the big fan of Bastia, and Murray Rothbard too. You know, if you want to make simple for Bastia, the state is the problem and the free market is the solution.
Right. So we've got this course. As Roxy is saying, it's part of the sociology component of the curriculum. And so you're contributing to this. It's certainly the kind of knowledge that can help every Bitcoiner build a stronger conviction, deeper roots for understanding the value of Bitcoin. Do you have more courses coming, Damien?
Yes, my next course is about political philosophy and what are the principles of a free society. I believe strongly that we have to study this question.
Yeah, it's a crucial question. And the first time Damien came to us saying that he wanted to do that series of 4 courses in philosophy, the history, the ethics, the practice of philosophy and liberty, the practice of freedom. How do you actually use the tools? What is the limit of the states and freedom? Mentioning, for example, the COVID. Is it another extension of their right or not? All of those questions are so essential for understanding to what extent they went and to what extent the state is omnipresent to what actually it could be. And I think it's what you understand, that they are too powerful, too big. And you ask yourself naturally the question of like, but what happens if we don't have the states? Who is going to build the road? Who is going to secure the free market? Who is going to do that? And I think it's really important that we have those classes, those courses that basically help you answer the question: are we in a capitalist system, or is it a copinage system of capitalist? What is the role of the government and the law, the separation of power between the army, the law, and the states, and the money printing? All of those questions are really like crucial to understand how the world will shift if there is a money that cannot be stopped and that more people adopt it. Can we go back to the roots of what those liberal thinkers thought back in the day? And I think, Damien, another courses that we are trying to add pretty soon is the courses of the early libertarian thinker of France, right?
Yes, yes, and the good news is that Bitcoin is reviving this wisdom from the past. And I'm sure Bitcoin is the solution.
What I noticed during the conversation between Giacomo and Ulrich is that at some stage they started reflecting about on the origin of the concept of private property. And that's when they mentioned the natural law, the fact that property is a natural right and everything. And I think that within your course, you are addressing this philosophy. Is it John Locke or something like that? So for those who want to further explore these notions, I think the course is a good starting point, isn't it?
Yes, yes. At the beginning of the course, I say there are only two political philosophy. One is the philosophy of power, and the other is the philosophy of liberty. So why a course on the philosophical history of freedom? Ludwig von Mises said one day, history is the result of ideas. Knowing ideas is the best way to understand the world today. I mean, about violence, money, education, state control. Most important, the need to protect individual liberty and private property. We have to learn about freedom, what freedom is, because we cannot take it for granted and we must cherish it. In my course, I track the origins of freedom in antiquity with the Greeks and Romans, through the Middle Ages with the birth of universities and the first form of capitalism in Italian cities like Venice or Florence. From the Renaissance to the Enlightenment, I describe the rise of freedom, religious tolerance, and the fight for free trade with great thinkers like Adam Smith, the physiocrat, Voltaire, Turgot, and the founding fathers in Philadelphia. Then I investigate the apogee and the decline of liberty in modern time, the Marxist critique of capitalism, and the Austrian critique of Marxism. And finally, the rise of the welfare state in the 20th century and the great fight between Keynes and Hayek.
And what is really fascinating with this course is that it really drives you through history. So if we look basically just at the curriculum, you go from the freedom of power, the antique, then the Middle Age, then the Renaissance, and then the decline of our society in nowadays. So we really follow like how the society shaped itself with new thought, new law, new technology, also that and all that. And for example, the incompatibility of the Roman Empire that need expansion and war to spoliate other civilization basically to survive, compared to a society that try to survive by producing its own good through innovation, which is two completely different paths for someone to take.
Yeah. I mean, I'm super convinced of the very high relevance of integrating that sort of courses in Plan B network curriculum, because an understanding of the technology and the economics of Bitcoin is certainly crucial. It's fundamental, but I think having some sort of historical perspective and grounding into the wisdom of humankind, and the best that we've evolved in terms of principles that we've tried to enshrine in constitution that states always manage to circumvent and cheat. I mean, here we have a technology that makes it possible to basically apply those sound principles of collaboration between human that we found a long time ago, right? So for me, it makes it possible to realize that I'm just part of a fight that started a long time ago. It's just that we have a stronger tool to make a difference now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be a tool that will be used the more there is inflation. And so, like we mentioned, we're trying to teach about the history of where we are, but also the economics and the finance, what the courses on finance is being produced. We have a courses on hyperinflation, for example, produced by David. And that table that you can see here, it's quite famous, right? But basically, how many hyperinflation did we experience in the past 50 years, in the past 300 years? It's quite a lot for the magnitude of the disaster that it brings to a civilization. And so it's because you understand those, it's because you see the similarity between them happening at different time in different places, that we can better prepare and see it. And if you look at the root cause of most of the hyperinflation, we always end up to the same root cause of why do we lose our freedom and why does the states get bigger. And there's a fine line in between all of those events, socially, philosophical, the freedom, and it gets basically to the states take more power, and one of the big power is the money printing machine, which is able to control inflation, which is a really easy way to spoliate everyone without them revolting too soon or too quickly. And it's really that Bitcoin is fighting at the end. And yeah, there's a lot to explore.
Okay, so we've got courses that refer to economic violence, hyperinflation. We've got courses about freedom, liberty, the notion of private property, that sort of thing. Now, you've got also a sort of a library where you list all books that may be of interest for Bitcoiners. Which books would you suggest in relation to money, violence, and war? There's probably that money talks or what? Well, the money sound and unsound. That's the one we've been discussing with Giacomo and Ulrich,
Yeah, I guess when for about hyperinflation to really learn about what happened, you have when money dies,
right?
Yes, excellent book.
what government has done with the money.
Yes, of course.
The sovereign individual is good because it describes the evolution of
Yes.
the dynamic, the balance of power between offense and defense, and so it's about violence and war as well.
This one would be one of the most interesting regarding really Bitcoin and not less more economics. Like, so if we need to cross path between the two fields, simply because it tried to forecast how the world will change now that information can go super highway through internet. But they write it in 1997. So basically, they try to forecast what internet, which is basically the liberation of information to the masses, is going to bring to the states and the economy. And they don't yet know that money on the internet is not yet to come before basically 20 years. So it's really interesting the dynamics of them forecasting what internet will bring, considering there will be a money for internet. So they call Bitcoin, they quote the equivalence of what Bitcoin could be, but it's not here yet. With their perspective of like how the world could be, they include Bitcoin, and they're really on the nut. Like they're really consistent and they're really good at forecasting the basic math. And when I read that book, it made me thought a bit of how maybe it's a far fetched, but on stream economics will think it was really rational. Like we are human beings, we need to do that. The economy is gonna do that, and they were not trying to do complete math question. They were just trying to take basic axiom of like how the human brain works, how people will use that technology and make outcome of the government is going to lose power because the individual is going to get more power. And it was really nice socially, I'd say, psychologically.
Right. Any other book you can think of?
Big Debt Crisis. I think that one is way more complex. It's more into finance. I actually do want to do a courses on that to make the study of financial crisis through the past 100 years, but it would be like a really advanced level class. And I'm still looking for the teacher. So if you want to contribute, feel free. Basically, it's Ray Dalio, which is one of the founder of one of the biggest hedge fund in the world and one of the best investor in the world, that analyzed basically more than 100 debt crises, and he's looking at the pattern and he's trying to figure out how we can recognize them, how the situation evolves through the debt crisis, so the explosion of the at the end the sovereign money that they were supposed to give back. And it really give a lot of insight if you are into finance and economics and numbers, to actually put numbers in perspective and not just social. Usually, when we talk about inflation, we say people lose everything. Yes, they do lose everything. But how does it reflect on houses prices? How does it reflect really on the prices of gold for goods? How does it reflect on employment, on innovation? How does it reflect in the more concrete path of our life? And that book really go in depth into the analysis of those financial crises. So if you are more into the finance side, definitely a great book to get into.
And I think it's a good point, because when you start studying Bitcoin, of course, you're going to look at the price chart and you're going to find some regularities and so some sort of cyclic nature in the evolution of the price. So you become familiar with the notion of cycle, and then you end up reading those books, Ray Dalio's Cycles approach, and the force turning, and you realize that the happening of conflicts, worldwide conflicts and wars, is something that's also very cyclic, very much connected to economic cycles. The states are getting in such a difficult position that they look for a scapegoat here and there just to reset the whole thing. So I think it's good to look into those books describing such cycles, right?
Yeah, but one thing we need to consider is that, like you mentioned, the Fed or the state, the country, whatever they are, which organ it is, can reset the system. And there's something that we should be aware is that sometimes and often when the states fail, it's just a bigger states that is replacing it. When the government fail, very often it's a stronger government that's going to come, take more of your power, change even more the system, put more law, more rules, because they will say it failed because it was too free. We need to control it better. If we had more power, we could have prevented that mistakes. The bank failed because they were private small banks. If it was one big bank, it will never fail because we would be behind it. And so every time it fails, the states is there, both the cause and the effect, and it will just grab more power from the individual. And that's something we should really be afraid. The next time there is a next pandemic, the next time there is a big financial crisis, a crash, to what extent are they going to say, oh yeah, it's because of the small individual, we need more control? And sadly it will happen, and we I mean, as a collective, we need to stand and say, yeah, let's not allow that. Like, let's just stop the madness. But it's hard to stop the madness, so we need to unfund the Fed. And to do that, we just need to exit the euro, basically.
Right. So we've got the courses, we've discussed a few books, and you can read the summary. Now we've got some conferences. Can you think of conferences where some talks were given that very much tackle the sort of issue we have around money, violence, and war?
Yeah, maybe before going to conferences, but we can explore. There's also like we have educational toolkit. Like, for example, we have the entire collection of inflation bill accessible in HD for you to download. So it's like a library of historical figure. That's the V1. We were going to try to make something more interactive, to really just say, hey, you want to explore how the states failed so many people around the world at so many times? Here's the book to actually like go see case by case. But I think that's going to be a really cool tool. About conferences, I would actually say that we don't have enough of replays of conferences surrounding the topic of finance, economic, and philosophy. And so actually something we want to do with Damien is that there's a lot of institutions around the world that have doing great job at collecting those thought leaders. École de la Liberté is one of them, Damien. You mentioned a couple of other, like the Mises Institute, for example, and maybe we could try to work with them, right, Damien?
Yes, also I think about in Great Britain, Adam Smith Institute, the Institute for Economic Affairs, Learn Liberty, Students for Liberty. There is a lot of organization, and we can collaborate with them.
In relation to those conferences, you might not have listed yet the very recent conference held in Riga 2024, but I want to mention one talk given by Matthews Mizinskis, extremely relevant because it describes how many European nations tried to escape, or actually to take away their gold stack away from the Nazis who were invading very quickly the whole continent. And so it's quite fun. It's very historical, and it's a good way to figure out the huge difference that Bitcoin is introducing in terms of of property, how easy it is to transport, to hide, how tough it is to confiscate, and everything. So I would strongly recommend this talk. We'll add a link to it, right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And we're adding the search option on those replay because there's so many. But even just the talking about those people that have fought it, and when you go over Damien's courses, you realize that, of course, history is a ever repeated circle, and a lot of thought people that were like against the state got censored. Some other like got basically booed by the elites, or other economics didn't took them as serious as they should have. And there's always that reciprocity to try to fight the opposite of what is considered the statu quo, especially when Keynes basically won. Because at the end, Keynes won. In my opinion, the Keynesian movement has won and is like even getting bigger and bigger. I don't know, Damien, what you think about that, by the way.
About Keynes?
Yeah, his influence in
Yes.
today's society and in the institution, in the thought of the Nobel Prize and all those people that basically make decisions.
Is it still growing or is it fading away?
It's still growing. In classroom is very present in economy and history and philosophy. It's like a lens to see the world, and this lens show the world as a mechanic, and you have big elites to manipulate the mechanics, and everything is good.
Yeah, and individual agency is secondary in the picture, in this
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah.
One thing maybe we could do to wrap up this call is for you, Roxy, to perhaps share a few news, things that are happening at the moment at Plan B Network, and maybe just mention that people like Damien, Damien just called you. I think he called you and said, look, I mean, I've got all these courses. That's what I'm teaching. That's what my life is all about. That's my fight. That's the cultural fight I'm engaged in. How can I support Plan B Network? How can I give visibility to those ideas? And you've welcomed him. And I'm sure there are some other people who might want to join. Can you let us know how to do it?
Absolutely. So we're really proactively trying to get more educators joining the platform, producing high quality courses, supporting them with educating grant to really try to produce those courses that we are missing, because we do believe there is at least 100 courses on Bitcoin, freedom, technology, tech that could be produced and just waits for the occasion. So everything is open source and via a GitHub repo that anyone can fork, use, and contribute. We have created many tutorials, and when I say many, it's really many tutorials to explain you how to contribute with GitHub, to use the tools that help us get better, from creating your GitHub account, adding like a conference replay if we're missing, a new language to do translation, to become a prof, to write a tutorial, to add a course. And there is no limits, even if it's just simply like proofreading. For example, here you can see that we're basically paying people to review the proofread from the AI translation. So there is always a mechanism to get people more involved. Teacher wise, just so you know, even the students have that. There's a whole dashboard accessible for the students to keep track of their progress, and soon there will be like diploma and exams. But for the teachers, you can have your teacher's account profile And basically you will see like the courses that you've created, and you also have the review, so you know how many people have taken the class, you know how they did, you have details of if they liked it, there's feedbacks. So basically everything is thought so that the teacher can have like an interaction with the students. I did many classes. The idea is really to encourage and give you the tools as a teacher to connect with students, share your knowledge, share your passion. We will deal with all the translation and all the optimization. So basically, if you go into like, I don't know, let's say Bitcoin 101, I produced it in French, right? But it's in Italian and it's in Portuguese, and I'm pretty sure it's in Japanese. And so all of that enabled basically to have your courses shared to a broader audience in a fully distributed way, because we're also integrating peer runtime. So basically the goal is that the platform cannot be censored. So in the future, the platform will basically not rely on web browser, and it will not be as easy to stop as a basic website. I think that's going to be quite important because, for example, to just mention a few, we have a courses on Bitcoin privacy. We literally explain how everything is working from code join to heuristic to like how the state agency to a certain degree are analyzing.
So you've got some sort of sensitive content that could be targeted in certain
It
times.
is already probably illegal in some countries simply because Bitcoin is illegal in some countries. Like a simple tutorial, like to give an example, the tutorial on how to create your mnemonic phrase directly from dice. That is basic human right. It's just math. It's just memorizing information, piece of data. It's getting cash in your head. That is illegal in some countries. Yet it's really important that people understand how to do it, how it works, how to recop the money, how to securely re-put the words in a laptop, etc., etc., etc. So in a world where basically they're gonna force us to give us the public key and then the private key to the central bank of our country, it's important that we build the tools that will fight back that and give access to most people. And you can even like say you like the course.
Yeah. Damien, what's been your experience as a teacher proposing, offering your course on Plan B Network? Did they welcome you properly? What would you say to people like you who might want to contribute?
My hope is that many teachers like me will join us to build other courses and to make a great university around the world online. Yes, it's the goal.
Okay. Well, guys, it's been a fantastic tour, a very comprehensive one, I would say, of Plan B Network platform. We've looked into some interesting learning resources that you can explore if you want to deepen a little bit the topic on money, violence, and war. I think we'll have more of these interaction in the weeks to come as we delve into different topics. Roxy, it's been fantastic. I wish you all the best. Same to your team. Excellent work. Damien, thanks so much for sharing with us
Thank you, Jacques.
the work of your life and your passion. And you don't need to be registered to the best school in France or have your children attend your classroom. You can be just a random Bitcoiner and have access to the best quality of knowledge. Thanks a lot, both, and I wish you an excellent day. Bye bye.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you, Damien, for being here.
Bye bye.